clinics and layout tours similar to what you will find at its annual in-person fall convention, its producers are working to find ways to offer unique segments that distinguish it from the in-person fall convention. NERx will be broadcast on the NMRA YouTube channel on the date and time shown, and everyone is invited to watch. NERx showcases what is happening in the NMRA's northeastern region and sharing it with the model railroad community. So let's take a deeper dive into what NERx is. At a typical in-person convention, the layouts you see are owned by members of the host division.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. That was very informative. Got a few questions that came in here that we'd like to have your opinion on. I think maybe the most interesting one here is how do you determine whether to use paint or powder in your weathering?
Yeah, so it honestly, a lot of the times what it does come down to is the effect that I'm trying to replicate, and the stage in the process that I'm at. When I want harder lines, I'll typically use paint, whether that be acrylic or oil paints. Whereas if I want more kind of blending and softer lines, I'll use powders. So, for example, in the clinic, as I went through the steps, I started with the paints, and then I added the powders around, especially around the paint streaks, to really soften those edges and give the effect of it just kind of fading off of the car.
Okay, cool. Somebody asked if you ever use an airbrush.
Yeah, so I have an airbrush, and I do use it occasionally, but I don't have like really a permanent airbrush booth set up, anything like that. So it's kind of a process to set it up, which is why typically I don't tend to use it for weathering, because really I've used it for weathering for in the past really is the initial steps of fading the car, and then some of the final steps of adding some layers of grime and dirt around the bottom of the car. And I found that I can get similar effects to what I get with the airbrush using these other techniques that don't require me to set up my compressor and set up my, open up my window and get some airflow going and stuff like that. So it's a good tool, but it's not necessarily one that you need to get some good effects.
Okay. And somebody asked if you clear coat the models.
Yeah. So for me, it depends. I do a lot of stuff for myself, but I also do some stuff for friends. If I'm doing something for a friend, I will typically clear coat it, and I use just Tester's Dull Coat as a clear coat to seal it in. The reason I don't for myself is because when you clear coat a model, the initial blast of clear coat, in my experience, about half of the actual pigment that's on the car, the powder that you've put down, blows away. And then the other half of what is remaining gets kind of washed out with the clear coat. So when I'm doing stuff for myself, I don't mind having to go back and touch up the weathering again every now and again, just from handling the cars. But when I do stuff for other people and I'm not necessarily there to touch it up, I typically take the process of doing a clear coat and then doing another layer of weathering on top of that and doing a clear coat, so that way the effect builds up enough to where it's still visible after the clear coat.
Okay. Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Somebody asked, what was your learning curve in terms of number of cars before you were happy with your weathering result? I think you've got one you were going to show us.
Yeah. Right? So, like I said at the beginning, I've been weathering for just about my entire time in the hobby, which is more than a decade now. I've been weathering for probably 8 or 9 years. A lot of the stuff that I did early, I'm not super happy with. This right here, I keep this around because this here is let me adjust it so you can see. This is the first Boxcar, I believe, that I ever weathered.
Okay.
There it is.
Yeah.
It's not too good. But it was a starting point, and this is a cheap Machman train set car, so it was good for a starting point. But I'd say I probably did a solid 30 or 40 before I started getting results I was really, really happy with. And some of that was learning new techniques that I just kind of was working on cars using the techniques I knew. And then when I learned new techniques, it really improved my skills. And part of it is actually putting in the time to practice the techniques and get good at them.
Mm-hmm. Did you go back and redo some that you did earlier? Or
I've gone back and redone some, and a lot of that is just kind of cleaning off all of the crud that I put on there and kind of starting fresh. But I like to keep this around, and I also up here on my shelf I keep around the first engine I weathered, which is the dummy F3 or F9 that came with the starter set, which actually looks not too bad for how early I did it in the process.
So, but you dove right into your rolling stock when you did it. You didn't practice on $2 cars that you picked up at a train show or something first or anything.
Well, I didn't, only because I by the time I was getting into weathering, I'd already started a decent collection. So I started with the cheaper end of stuff I had, which was the Bachmann train set cars as opposed to the Microtrains Boxcars.
Okay.
So I went with the stuff that I wasn't as concerned about looking amazing.
Okay.
And then worked my way into the stuff that I was more like, yeah, I want this to look really good because it's got some nice detail.
Okay. And as you say, I don't know. I forgot what I was going to say. But
hate it when that happens.
Yeah. Maybe it'll come to me. Let's see what else we have. Do you find it more challenging to weather an N scale than in larger scales?
Well, I guess I've been doing it in N scale for the whole time, so I find actually N scale pretty easy to do. The only things that I don't love about doing an N scale is you got to get some really fine point brushes for some of those techniques.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funnily enough, when I jump up to, like, I do some stuff for my friends in HO scale, and when I jump up to that, I find it harder to do the HO scale stuff because there's more detail to see, and if you make a little mistake, it's a lot easier to notice it. Whereas if I make a little mistake in an N scale car, it's a lot easier to kind of cover that up by redoing parts of it or covering over parts of it. So I actually find N scale a little bit easier to do, but that also may just be biased from having so many years of doing it.
Okay. Let's see what else. Somebody talked about using the opposite color on the color wheel I'm not sure what they were looking for there.
I think it was Mind Mount Models in the chat that brought it up, but instead of using white, you can use very light passes or very minimal pigment of a color opposite the car color on the color wheel to fade the car. So for example, the car that I was doing in the clinic was red, so he was suggesting a touch of green, which does do the job because it kind of cancels out the red is canceled out by the green because they're opposites on the color wheel. The reason I don't do that a lot is because it's a lot easier to only get one paint. I'm pretty young and therefore pretty broke because I'm just out of college. So only having to buy one paint and not having to mix paints and worry about that makes the process a little smoother for me.
Okay. I was wondering if do you mix colors to get the color that you want, or you usually can find something that works right out of the bottle?
Well, because like I said, I usually just use the white, so that's usually good. Sometimes I do mix, and it's all about matching the base color plus having a little bit of fading built into that color when you're mixing.
Okay. Let's see. Do you remove the roof walks from modern when you do something that's shouldn't have a roof rock?
Yeah. So actually the car that I did on the clinic originally had a roof walk, and I used an X-Acto to trim off the tabs that were holding it on, and then a lot of sanding work and filing work to get it to match the profile of the roof, and then Tamiya modeling putty to fill in any of the gouges. So it takes some work to remove it, but for me it's worth doing because I modeled that era transitioning between having roof walks and not having roof walks. So I don't cut down the ladders on a lot of my cars, and I leave the brake gear high, but I do remove the roof walks, and it's part of the process of weathering on certain cars. It's just part I didn't feel like necessarily needed to be in the clinic.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Somebody said, what's your favorite weathering project that you've ever done. I think you've
Yeah.
got something to show it there too.
So I've got a couple. I don't know if I could narrow it down to one, but I've got a couple of picks here. This is the first car that I did that I was super proud of how it came out. It was a New York Central car that I patched out to Conrail, and I was really happy with the techniques. And this was kind of the genesis of where a lot of the techniques that I use now came from. They were really built and honed on this car. And this car I did, I think, 4 years ago now. And then this car here, it was another car that I did as part of, and not really a clinic, but a how-to on my YouTube channel. And I know this will make you sad to see, Ed, but it's a New Haven script letter Boxcar that's all beat up, and I used the one that they've got at the Danbury Railroad Museum as an inspiration for it. But
Okay.
I was very happy with how the rust came out on it and the fading. And I was just super pleased with it. But yeah, so those are two of my favorite jobs that I've done. And the third one, which is not in the area right now, is actually one you've probably seen before if you get the Walthers catalog, because it was the car I did for the Walthers weathering competition last year. It was a yellow Burlington Northern reefer car that I was super, super happy with. So if you go back to I think it was your October Walthers flyer, you'll see it in there.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, any last thoughts, or are we good?
If you want to see more of my work, I do a lot of live streams on YouTube, weathering every Monday, and feel free to pop in. It's usually Monday nights at 9 on my channel, which is N-Scale Train Boy. Feel free to pop in there and ask me any questions you've got on techniques I use or products I use or anything like that, and I'd be more than happy to share.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Dennis.
My pleasure.
Very informative, very helpful. I think we're going to cut away for just a second, and then we'll get on with the drawings here.
Hello and welcome to tonight's NERx drawing for two $50 gift certificates from tonight's sponsor, Mind Mount Models.
How you
I'm
doing,
Chuck
everybody?
Kolchak, and with me tonight in the studio is the owner of Mind Mount Models, Ron Klaiss. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you, Chuck.
Well, thank you for sponsoring NERx, Ron. Having sponsors on the show helps attract viewers, to see what the NMRA is all about, what the Northeastern region is all about, and for tonight, for what Mind Mount Models is all about. So I don't know if you have something that you would like to talk about Mind Mount Models, what you're all about, and maybe even give us a hint of what's maybe coming down the pike for Mind Mount Models.
Well, we're a Craftsman structure kit that have been around for just over 6 years. Our line is constantly growing. Right behind me is actually a kit that I'm about to put out in the next week or two, putting the finishing touches on that and then finalizing the directions and everything. So be prepared to see that. If you want to see any of our new stuff or any of our sales that are going on, you can always go to mindmountmodels.com and sign up for our email listing. I don't bombard you with all kinds of emails constantly, just when we have something new or when we have a sale going on.
Okay. And you have a Facebook page and all of that as well. So
yep, we got a Facebook page. I'm on Instagram. That's pretty much it there. I do have a YouTube channel that I'm going to try and reawaken. I'm actually redoing my layout, Chuck. It's going to be a yep. I'm in the process of tearing my current layout out. It's about 75% of the way out of there, and it's going to be a car float and street running operation and stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that, and it gives me a good opportunity to introduce new kits while I'm making it for my new layout. So a lot of structures are on the way.
Did you save your signature scene, the bridge and all of that, or
it's still there? I haven't touched that one yet. I was debating if I want to try and cut that as a big chunk and put it in the corner of my shop or not. That's going to be tough to do, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how this drawing is going to work, I'm going to share my screen so you can. Oh, maybe not. Can you hear me, Speed? Or Ron,
Yep.
Can you hear me? Oh, here we go.
Yep.
All right. Yeah,
All good.
just a little bit of a lag there. Sorry about that. Okay, so how this drawing is going to work is we had nearly 100 people register for the drawing tonight. Again, two $50 gift certificates. So what I'm going to do is give the wheel a spin, and whatever number it lands on, Ron is going to call out the name of the person, because what I provided Ron with is a list in a spreadsheet of all of the people that registered, and the number will correspond to the line item in the spreadsheet. So since it's St. Patrick's Day, I wish everybody luck in this spin.
I hope you don't mind. I added about my name. I put on there about 5 or 6 times. Give me a couple extra chances. 45. So let's go to the big list here and look at 45. We are looking at Joe Calderon. Joe Calderon, congratulations. You were the first.
Geez.
There's my mail ticket.
A local guy in New Jersey, Joe.
Oh yeah, I remember Joe.
Okay, well, good. Congratulations, Joe.
Yep, Joe. Okay, I'll send you out. I'll send you out the certificate code. And then I'll get in contact with you. I have your email.
Okay. What I'm going to do now is remove 45 from the wheel so that Joe can't win twice. So we're going to give it another spin.
Doubling up 45 here. We're going to 90.
Yeah, how about that?
Let's see what we got here. 90 is Charles Cole. Charles, congratulations. You are the second winner of a Mind Mount Model gift certificate. I'll get that out to you. I have your email. That's very cool.
All right. Well, congratulations to Joe and Charles. And thank you once again, Ron, for sponsoring NERx this year. It's been great having you on. This is your first year being on NERx, and we really appreciate you being there. And that's it for tonight. So tomorrow we're going to have a whole new drawing, so make sure you register for that. And please support Ron and his business. He's got some great structure kits out there, and plus a line of details too. So don't miss that. Go to his website and check it out.
MyMountModels.com. I appreciate it, guys. I've been attending more and more NMRA division meets and stuff, so hopefully I get to go to the regional meet soon. Not just virtually, but it's good to see people in person too. So
yes,
looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you again, Ron.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Off.
All right, so what I'm going to do, Speed, I'll introduce the oh, okay. Well, so that's what I'm going to do. Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Ron, and good luck. Good luck tomorrow in the drawing. There'll be another drawing tomorrow night, folks, for you. So we're going to move on with our next layout tour. This is the Union Railroad of the Heritage Park Museum, provided to us by Rich Breton. This is up in the Seacoast Division up in New Hampshire, and it will be on the it'll be a layout tour that will be on during the convention this fall in September up in Concord. So catch that. It will be followed by a tip from Drew James called Lighting on the Cheap. So go ahead, Speed.
Hi, I'm Rich Breton. Welcome to Heritage Park Railroad Museum in Union, New Hampshire. To help you better understand the reasoning and the location of this layout, take a look at this 1915 map of the Boston and Maine Railroad. We've marked the location of the main line from Union to Ossipee. This map shows both the actual location of the museum in Union as well as the section of the railroad modeled within the museum exhibit. The 5 villages which are modeled from north to south are North Wakefield, East Wakefield, Wakefield, Sanbornville, and Union. The actual track diagrams from the Boston and Maine Railroad were developed into this model railroad as shown on this hand-drawn track plan. This quick overall view of the layout shows the 5 villages of Wakefield. The first one you're seeing is Union. That white freight house is the building where that layout is actually located in. Then you have the passenger station, the blacksmith shop, the Union Hotel. Then this goes into Union Meadows with the Excelsior Mill. And then we quickly progress over to where Level Lake was. This is a coal shed that was a fueling point for the locomotives. Then on the back wall, you see the Sanbornville Freight House, the Sanbornville Passenger Station. In the corner, you have the roundhouse itself. You can see the town hall out in the corner. Then you quickly get into Wakefield with an ornate passenger station. Then you can progress through a couple of brooks, and you enter East Wakefield. This is a very busy section of the layout. The Victorian house, and there's the passenger station itself. Then you see the freight house. And then along over here, you now go into our last village, which is the village of North Wakefield. Now we're going to go back south and look at this area in a little more detail. This first area you see is our workshop, which houses the staging area, which we refer to as Dover. In the middle of the wall, at the edge of the wall, is where the Milton station is. And then we quickly get into a scenic area of the layout where you get to see some of the details. This past year, we've made a lovely beaver pond with beavers cutting down trees in such area. Visitors often like this area, the marshy area. You'll notice you can see a moose and other critters and other things, details there. We then have a highly detailed sawmill with a complete interior that was donated to us. It was built into this area. It's about a half a mile from where the museum is located. And then you can see in here, there's a lot of other details along there. The waterways and the dam and things like that that was used to power the sawmill itself. Before we head a little further north, let's take a quick look at these two screens that are built into the fascia. There's a monitor that's built into the fascia that's showing the camera car going by. And on the right screen, you're actually seeing the image from the camera car on a second monitor. These are built into the fascia. You can see what that looks like. And at the same time, we can also change it so you can see what trains are going by on the North Wakefield area. Continuing north, we arrive in the village of Union, which is very interesting. All of these structures you see, many of them are still existing, were all scratch built. You can see the freight house, the passenger station as it was in 1909, the Union Hotel, the blacksmith shop, and other buildings that are there. It's quite interesting for visitors as they can see the same buildings right outside the freight house in actual what they look like today. One of the 5 villages that we model, one of them is Union, New Hampshire, is where the freight house is located. This building right here is a scratch-built model that represents the freight house as it looked in 1909. This building is what houses the model railroad displays. It was actually built in 1875. A lot of the buildings in the village of the Union are still buildings that are there. We modeled 1909, so the Union passenger station is as what it looked like in 1909. The current passenger station, which has been restored across from the tracks, was built in 1911, 1912. And when they opened that, they tore this building down over here. Some of the other buildings you're noticing over here is the school that was up on top of the hill. The trains used to bring students by train to go to the school. This is a very interesting building over here. This is a Union Hotel. That building still exists today. It's the Wakefield Resource Center. That building was a terminus of the railroad in 1854. If you went further, you would go by stagecoach. So a lot of the details that are on the layout represents what life was like in 1909. Across the way is what they call the Flatiron House. That was the post office in 1909. Some of the smaller houses that are located in the area are still there as well. This blacksmith shop is one of our newest additions to the layout. This is the Union Blacksmith Shop located on Bridge Street in the village of Union. It has fully scratch built and follows the historical aspects of just a real blacksmith shop that still exists. The door has working hinges, and if we look, you can see inside of it a fully detailed interior. You see the forge works. It's got all the parts inside you can see, including a post vise, a wheelwright on top of the water in real life as it is in the model. So it was carefully placed inside, and the rest of the Envirotex was poured to that effect. You can see the doors on the other side here. This is the village of Sanbornville. You're looking at Level Lake. Where these ice cars are located were 3 large ice houses, and they transported about 100 cars of ice per week in this area. If you look over in this area, this is the large coal shed. This large coal shed was used to refuel the locomotives, and Sanbornville was a division headquarters until 1911, when they have a devastating fire in the roundhouse. You can see behind the coal shed is a wood shed, where we still had wood-fired locomotives. You can see out in that area, we're zooming into that locomotive is the Ossipee. It belonged to the Eastern Railroad, which was acquired by the Boston and Maine in 1884. If we continue on the village of Wakefield, you can see in this area is the large passenger station. And there's a local passenger train that has stopped here at this point. You also see a camera car arriving on the back track. That's a local freight. So this area of Sanbornville had the Sanbornville station. The right part of it had a large restaurant that could serve up to 150 people in a half an hour. You can see the Sanborn house in the back. The area in the back is all photo backdrops. You can see that area, with the Sanborn house is actually a line drawing that was made by a local artist. And we continue around, you can see the engine house, the roundhouse, and the turntable out in the front of it. You can see that carpenter shop, or the car shop where they would repair cars. Then you have a general store, the Garvin building. And then we go on to the town hall, which was built in 1875. Town hall has working clocks, as well as a bell tower with a sound module in it. Visitors can press the button, but it actually rings every 15 minutes using the train controller software as well. The local freight train is arriving in the village of Sanbornville. All the trains are automatically controlled with train controller software. And you can see likewise the passenger train is arriving. It's a local passenger train. The smaller building you see in the front was the Pioneer Press building. The only building that had electricity in 1909. It generated itself. It's where the black stack is. We also have lights inside the building. You can see the train departing in the rear track, and then the passenger train is departing in the front. Train locomotive number 27 is actually being controlled manually, which we do, as local freight is passing behind the woodshed. We allow visitors to run these trains as long as they stay within the range and things like that. And, All of our structures are scratch built. You can see as number 27 is approaching the wood shed and the coal shed. The large coal shed was built by Bill Gaver. This is the village of East Wakefield portion of the layout. This is one of my favorite ones, and I've actually made a clinic before on how the scenery and stuff was done in this area. So as we're approaching it from the north, this is the freight house, and then you go into the passenger station. This is the reason we model September 1909. There was a fire in September 26 in 1909, so we're actually modeling 2 weeks prior to the fire. You look at the scenery in here, you can see a combination of the clouds were all painted. It kind of frames the layout. Lee Gridley from Ossipee had painted all these clouds. The bottom part is a light blue with white mixed together, and then all of the backdrop that you're seeing are actual real photos that we took. We went up on one of the farms and actually got 270 degrees of photos. This is only about 2 feet deep. We actually have intentional made the buildings in the back smaller. These buildings are HO scale. This is 3/4 of HO scale. And that's an N scale paper model actually of a school. And then you can see how that road wanders out through there to make it look like it's much further away. A lot of the vehicles and stuff, this was a very busy station. This was the station agents area and the post office for a while. And then over in here, we've got some of the waterways that were actually modeled to match that. So you can see some of the cows in the barn out in the back are actually N scale to again make that look further away. So it's a very interesting part of our layout. So. The last village model is the village of North Wakefield, which was named Matthews. Here you'll find the Matthews Station, which was a small combination flag stop station. It has a fully detailed interior. It was one of the first models made about 12 years ago. It has a lot of interest and details around it. The model railroad continues just north of this to what we call the Ossipee Mountains. It eventually continued just past North Conway to Inner Vale, where it interchanged with the Main Central. Before we end the escorted layout tour, we'd like to share a few moments of the trains in action. These trains are controlled by train controller software, so the trains are all running automatically. Thank you for visiting Heritage Park Railroad Museum. Please visit us again in person during the Concord Flyer NER convention this coming September.
Hi, I'm Drew James, and after about 10 years of working on the CS&P, I decided it was time to start adding lights to the structures and the streets, etc. And after doing one small section of the layout, I realized that I was going to need over 200 lights. And therefore, I needed an economical approach to add all those lights onto the layout. A number of the commercial systems, such as Woodland Scenic's Just Plug systems, are great and they work really well, and I like them, but the lights cost $8 to $10 or more a light, and I quickly realized that that was going to be unaffordable to do across my whole layout. So what I'd like to share with you today is the approach that I settled on for adding lights to the Canada, Spokane, and Pacific Railroad.
The first item you need is a power supply. On the CS&P, I have 12-volt DC power buses that run around the layout because I use those to power things such as my tortoise switch machines or sound modules. So I was able to tap off those buses and use them for lighting. If you don't already have a bus underneath your layout, then you need a 12-volt DC power supply of some sort. The wall wart ones that you can get pretty much anywhere for $5 to $10 each work well for this. I have a box full of these that I've saved from discarded electronics. You do need to cut the end plug off and separate out the positive and the negative wires from these supplies, which we'll then use to connect to a terminal strip. So save those discarded electronics and use them underneath your layout to power your accessories, including lighting. Perhaps the key component in the lighting system, which I use on the CS&P, is the DC to DC converter. This is a small module. It's about 1 inch by 2 inches in size. So it's easy to mount it underneath your layout using screws or double-sided tape, which is what I use. You can find this on Amazon as an LM2596S DC to DC buck converter. And this converter takes your 12 volts from your wall wart or your bus that's underneath your layout and can convert it to any voltage less than that input voltage that you need. So for LEDs, those typically run on 3 volts. So I use this to convert from the 12 volts down to 3 volts. It's very easy to set up because it has an onboard voltmeter, and then it has a little pot that you can trim using a screwdriver. It's simple to set it to the output voltage that you need. I also use these for an output voltage of 9 volts because I have some old lamp type lights that are not LEDs that require 9 volts. So in some areas I have multiple converters depending on the output voltage I need. And also, I like that pot because it's easy to trim and get the brightness that you want of your lights. So I typically, for 3 volt LEDs, I typically set my output voltage at like 2.7 volts just because I think it provides it looks better to not have the LEDs quite so bright. If you're like me, you don't like to solder and you really hate soldering underneath your layout. To avoid having to do any soldering, I use these Nextronics connectors. I get these off of Amazon. They're very inexpensive, $25 for $5.50. I like them because it's easy to hook up your wires and then you can change the polarity if you need to. You don't even need a crimp tool. And they seem to hold well once you've got everything running, and you just leave them alone and they work great. So I really like these connectors. You're going to need a number of terminal strips, and whichever ones you can find inexpensively will work just fine. Finally, there are the lights themselves. And what I do for lights is I get almost all of mine from eBay. And I do a simple search of HO scale LED lights, and up pop dozens and dozens of options at very reasonable prices. Most of them are from suppliers in China, but even with the shipping, they usually cost no more than $1 or $2 per light, because they're very lightweight, which is good. And especially when you buy them in quantity, they are very inexpensive. I actually prefer a company called, We Honest, and I've had good luck with them over the years. They all typically require a 3-volt DC input. They do have different mechanisms for mounting them on your layout. Some have a screw type mechanism, and some you just need to drill a hole and glue them. Some of the lights I repaint into different colors so they'll look a little bit different, and almost all of them I will spray with a matte finish such as dull coat before I add them to the layout. But there is a huge variety of LED lights out there at very reasonable prices. Okay, it's time to put the complete circuit together. And what I do is I have the 12-volt DC power coming from that wall ward or the buses that run underneath my layout that is feeding into that DC to DC converter. You can see in this case, I've set the power converter output to 2.9 volts DC because I'm running 3-volt LEDs, and I usually set it for a little bit less than that rating in order to have a light that is not quite so bright. The output of the DC to DC converter is going into a terminal strip. In this case, I've split the terminal strip into 2 sections, a positive and a negative section. Typically underneath my layout, I would use 2 terminal strips, 1 positive and 1 negative, just because I have a lot of lights in a given area that need to be powered. Going to the lights themselves, the wires that come with the lights I connect to one of those Nextronics connectors. Sometimes if there are lights next to each other, I will connect multiple lights into the same connector. 2 is not too hard to do. Doing more than 2 gets more difficult. I have done 3 at times, but it becomes a little bit more tricky to get a good connection with all 3 lights. And then I have my wire runs that go from the Nextronic connectors to the terminal strip. One end to the positive side and one end to the negative side. And that is all there is to the basic, lighting circuits that are underneath the CS&P. A few hints and final thoughts. When I'm working underneath the layout, I wire up 1 light at a time and then test it. And then I check to make sure the previously working lights are all still working, because sometimes you bump something or disconnected it. So 1 thing at a time and then test. Also, once you get the first light working off of a DC to DC converter, you have the polarity correct. And so from that point on, as long as you use consistent wire colors, it's very easy to get them all working, and that you have the correct polarity. So if a light doesn't light up, it's the connection, not that you have the polarity backwards. So that first light that you're hooking up, I'm often swapping the polarity back and forth until I get it up and running. But after that, I know I don't have to swap the polarity again as long as I use a consistent wire colors. Neatness does count. Try to bundle wires together. Don't skimp on connectors and terminal strips and that type of thing. There are trade-offs, obviously, between the number of power supplies and converters and the length of wire runs. Theoretically, you could use, one converter, set it at 3 volts, and use it for your entire layout, and that would work fine if you have a small layout or a module. But when you have a larger layout, you're not going to want to have lengthy wire runs. So what I do is I have a converter per geographic area, which usually equates to a town, but in some towns I even there put in multiple converters just to cut down on the length of the wire runs, because those converters are inexpensive. They're only a few dollars, so it's worth having more of them and just cutting down on how long you need to run wires. You can, as I mentioned, you can have multiple converters underneath a town for lamps that require different input voltages. So I did have a number of lamps from my old layout that required 9 volts DC. I was able to use those as well, and just put in a different converter set at 9 volts for those lamps. And on the CSMP, this process can be expanded. And actually on the CSMP, we have added in relays, which can be controlled by a 5 volt signal that comes from our LCC system and JMRI. So not to get into the details of that, but you can add a bit more complexity so that you can control turning the lights on and off from a central location, such as a computer. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you, Rich, for your layout tour. That wraps up our first day of content in this year's NERx. Please tune in tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for another action-packed agenda of clinics, layout tours, and roundtable discussions. I particularly want to thank Paul Stamp and Artie Krass for being in the background here, helping me keep up with things. And of course, Speed for being in his Helix and running all the stuff for us here. I want to thank all the volunteers that gave their time in making this event possible, especially Chuck Diljak, Dave Inslee, Ed Olszewski, Dave Doerr, Peter Watson, Chris Carfaro, Mark Moritz, and Artie Krass. Thanks also to the NMRA National crew, especially Speed, for spending the week in the Helix helping us stream this great content. On behalf of the entire NER board, I want to thank you for joining us. Tune in tomorrow. We've got another raffle tomorrow and lots of good content. Thank you all for attending. See you tomorrow. Good night.